What's going on, Bears fans, and welcome to the CHGO Bears podcast presented by PointsBet. Use the promo code CHGO when you sign up to get 2 risk-free bets up to $2,000. Happy Tuesday, everyone, and I'm your host, Nicholas Moriano. And if you're watching the podcast, you can see Will DeWitt is in the bubble, but not for long, right, Will?
That's right. I'm breaking free of this bubble as I'll be up in the city, in the studio tomorrow and Thursday with you to continue counting down to camp. And I'm excited. It's been a little crowded in this bubble, and I need some stretching room. So looking forward to it.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's going to be a great time. And if you're also watching, you can also see next to me is our general manager here at CHGO and also our pitcher for last night's CHGO softball game, Jake Flanagan. Jake, what's going on?
Hey, man. Thanks for letting me sit in here. I'm occupying a slightly larger portion of your screen than Will today, but I love your hat, Will. Love it.
Thank you so much.
And I gave up, 1 run per inning last night? So that's not too bad, right?
Jake, you did a phenomenal job because we were giving up like 6 runs each inning, and then you came in and, we had some defensive stops. You just couldn't get enough runs out there, but it worked out well.
You had a few highlight catches, so nice job as well.
I
thought we did a great job all around as a team. We're still building to something, which is maybe a nice transition to what the Bears are hoping to do this year. I'll say this. I'm a huge Bears fan, and I love the Bears like I love cake. So we'll go with that.
There you go.
Looking forward to talking with you both today about a lot of things up front that I guess are near and dear to my heart, the big boys.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun show. We have a lot of players to talk about, and we're continuing the Countdown to Camp series. And before we do, though, and I kind of put this on you, Will, too, just right before, I want to talk about this whole idea that Justin Fields, ESPN kind of released their fantasy football predictions, and they had Justin Fields leading the league in interceptions with 16. I know a lot of Bears fans, are probably tired of all these negative criticism that always involve Justin Fields, but Justin Fields with 16 now. I'll give you 2 other guys that were right behind him. You had Baker Mayfield with 15 interceptions, obviously, in his new place at Carolina, and Zach Wilson with 14. But you see the Justin Fields at the top. What do you make of it?
I don't give a well, you know me. I don't really care at the moment. I kind of understand where they're coming from, though. He had 10 interceptions in 10 starts last year. So if he starts 17 games, which I think all 3 of us here want him to start all 17 games, then that does translate to 17 interceptions on the season. He is learning a new offense yet again. He has a whole new crop of playmakers that he has to work with, and I expect there to be growing pains, and I do expect interceptions to be a part of that equation. So I do understand where it's kind of coming from, and it doesn't really matter how many interceptions he throws as long as we're finding that growth. It's evident, and he's throwing a good amount of tutties. If you look last year, he had Stafford, Allen, Herbert, Burrow, Carr, Tannehill were all top 8 in the NFL last year with interceptions, and they're all considered pretty good quarterbacks because they're able to still produce and put up points. So if Justin can do that, having 16 interceptions, I don't think would be the end of the world. And again, I expect there to be some growing pains, as much as it sucks to say.
Yeah, it's expected. But, Jake, again, what do you kind of make of that? 16 interceptions. Again, fantasy football projections for Justin Fields.
Yeah. I don't think he's going to lead the league in interceptions. But like Will said, if he's in the bottom quarter, bottom third, that's probably to be expected, especially with the new coaching staff with so many new players on the roster. But it's okay because I want the Bears to be aggressive. I want this to be an offense that goes down the field. I want them to get vertical. I don't want them to go horizontal as much as they have under the previous regime. So that's okay. We're going to take chances, and there's going to be moments where receivers run wrong routes. But I think this team is going to be disciplined, and I think the mistakes that they'll make one week will be corrected in a lot quicker fashion than before, and that's what I love about it. How about you?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. And look, when you have a new offense and new receivers, it's going to take time. So if it's early on in the season where these interceptions, these mistakes are happening, to be expected. It's a whole new offense that Justin Fields is learning, and only in year 2. They're expecting him to make a jump, but if he is taking those shots downfield, which we want to see, he's testing these defenses, testing just every inch of the field.
Yeah.
and maybe a ball doesn't go your way. It gets tipped one way, and a receiver's not directly in the spot that he's supposed to be in, and it gets intercepted. It does happen. But there are quarterbacks like I see in the comments, like a Daniel Jones, that are still in the NFL. Right. There's other guys that are very worthy of being the interception leaders. But even if Fields does end up leading the league in interceptions, that doesn't mean it's a bad season. He could still show growth. He can show growth even if there are interceptions. So it's just another talking point at this point in the offseason, though, right?
It is.
We're a week away from training camp.
Right.
So once that starts, hopefully these negative criticisms about the Bears, Justin Fields can kind of be put to rest here.
I think he'll share the responsibility for interception just like a quarterback does on most interceptions around the league. But I think it'll be more about what the offensive line is doing, the tight ends protecting him, the running backs picking up some pass pro, and then also the receivers, like we said. Something that's not mentioned in this that we're not talking about, what I don't want Justin Fields to do is I don't want him to lose the ball and fumble it. That's something that we cannot give away those. If you're being aggressive downfield for some passes, okay, but you cannot just drop the ball. And I know that's something that he'll be working on, and it's important for what's protecting him to make sure that isn't as easy for the defense.
Absolutely, yeah, and we're going to talk about that group that's going to be protecting Justin Fields just in a little bit, but we're going to actually stick with this defense here and talk about the defensive line and what the Bears are bringing. And this is a unit that does have some new members in it, guys that are going to be taking on way bigger roles than before, and this is the first year since 2018, you guys. There's no Khalil Mack. There's no Akeem Hicks on this front seven, and now you're going to see what Matt Eberflus has in terms of the guys that are currently on this roster, and we're going to talk about Tier 1, and maybe a guy that come Week 1 might not even be here, and that's Robert Quinn, who led the Bears in sacks with 18.5, set the franchise record. I mean, that would be a huge blow if the Bears didn't have him, but we'll kind of list off the guys that we have in Tier 1, give our thoughts about them, and then kind of go from there. So in this tier that Will made it, and I agreed to a T with every guy that he had here in Tier 1. So we have Robert Quinn, if he's here, Trevis Gipson, Alquan Dean Muhammad, Angelo Blackson, Justin Jones, and then inching out and rounding out the first tier, Mario Edwards. You guys, we have a bunch of guys there, and like I was saying at the top, guys that kind of need to prove themselves a little bit. They're going to have way more of a role in this defense, and there's going to be competition too at the ends. But in terms of Tier 1 with the guys that they have, just overall thoughts on the group that's currently here for the Bears.
Well, for me, and Will can dive into this, I'm going to do a lot of listening to you two on this. But I'll just say, outside of Robert Quinn, if you're looking around the league, that's not a Tier 1 of a position group that I think you'd be blown away by, and that you're like, wow, that's great that's our top tier of defensive linemen. But you know what? Go and prove that what I just said wrong. And I think that's what the Bears coaching staff, that's going to be their task. But I'm interested to see what Will and you both have to say about these players and their upside.
Yeah, so for me, Robert Quinn, obviously what we saw in 2020 versus last season was a night and day difference. And when you look at his career, it's full of peaks and valleys, highs and lows. And he got super high last year in terms of his production, and the year before was perhaps the lowest of his career. So I would expect this season in Chicago, if he's here, to be just somewhere in the middle. And I think most fans would accept that right now out of Robert Quinn. One reason why I can expect the Bears to perhaps keep him around is when you look at the depth at defensive end. After he's gone, it gets really thin pretty quickly. Cap space, they don't need too much more right now. I don't know what the other moves they can technically make without his cap space coming off the books right now. And you have to find someone to take off his contract too. And one area of his game that we don't talk about enough is those forced fumbles. Like, he's done that consistently throughout his entire career. He has 7 since joining the Bears a couple of years ago. Even when he wasn't putting up the sacks in 2020, he was still finding ways to generate some takeaways. And with that being such an emphasis right now in this defense, that's why I would expect the coaching staff to look at Robert Quinn as someone who can be a difference maker in that regard, as well as be a leader, like a veteran presence for this younger group. Because behind him, we mentioned Trevis Gipson, Muhammad, who's been around but still a younger guy overall. Dominique Robinson, a rookie 5th rounder that I've been, super high on since the pre-draft process, and we'll talk about him later. But that's why, Nick, I would expect Quinn to stay. I know you used the preface, though, like if he's here, like what's your gut telling you?
I think he will be here at the start of the season, Will. At this point, I don't know what if there was a trade market for a Robert Quinn, it's not going to be as high as it is if it was later on in the season, where maybe a playoff team that maybe loses a pass rusher would need a guy like a Robert Quinn on a Bears team that most likely at that point in the season, around November where the trade deadline is at, is probably not going to be in contention to do much. So that's where the value, I think, for Robert Quinn can really peak. And like you said, I mean, he is coming off a career year for himself with the Bears.
Historic.
And now he's going into a 4-3 defense. And we can't lose value in what that can do for Robert Quinn this year specifically, where he can have his hand in the dirt, use his ability to get off the edge and, be even more, I'm not going to say in terms of sack production, but be maybe a more effective pass rusher than he has, especially in his first year. So there is a benefit for Robert Quinn being on this team. And again, you alluded to it too, Will, like the depth on this defensive line. You take away him, then there are other guys like a Trevis Gipson, who I am high on. I think he's a guy that has all the potential, has all the attributes to get to the quarterback, but he takes on a way more significant role in terms of snaps that he's going to have to play. And it's not just about getting to the quarterback. You have to be able to stop the run and be effective. With Matty Eberflus's defense, you need to run these stunts. You need to open up things for your linebackers. So that's going to be another task that Trevis Gipson, Alquan Muhammad, they got to take upon themselves on a more consistent basis. So if Robert Quinn isn't here, then you're adding a lot more to those guys.
So real quick, breaking news that's fitting with this positional unit. Eddie Goldman has retired, according to Ian Rappaport. Former Bear. Yeah, he has recently signed with the Falcons. He's informed that he is retiring instead of coming into camp. So I think that's kind of fitting from what we've seen out of him, taking off 2020, which the COVID year, I understand everyone's concerns that season, and I never faulted him for it. But he just never seemed really himself after returning last year. And that's a big reason why he isn't here any longer. And obviously his love for the game is starting to wane here. So Eddie Goldman, former Bears nose tackle, perfect timing, is decided to retire from the NFL.
That's very fitting timing, because I was just going to apologize for starting the conversation of previewing next year's defensive line with Khalil Mack and Akeem Hicks not being here, and how the impact of those players benefits Robert Quinn. And now, in a way, Robert Quinn, by him staying and being on this roster, can help benefit those younger players or players that maybe haven't proven as much in the league and are getting that opportunity for them to succeed. So you take Robert Quinn off this team, they could do that, right? Mm-hmm. But I don't know if that's the wisest decision, like you said. But I guess giving Eddie Goldman a little love here, like when he was right and at the start of his career, he was as important as any player on this Bears defensive unit to our success. And the tandem of him and Hicks, Mack there, what they did and how it helped the levels behind them. Mm-hmm. I mean, it made being a Bears fan so much fun, especially during that 2018 season. And so respect to him. I wish things would have worked out differently in his career. And I think we all wish the pandemic didn't happen. Yeah. But that obviously played a big part in what's happening with him coming back, and then now the decision to retire at age 27.
Wow, yeah. I think when I think of Eddie Goldman, I go back to, Sunday night against the Rams. Like, he was a big part of, I want to say he had a safety in that game and also applied pressure on Jared Goff that led to Roquan Smith's interception, if I'm not mistaken. That was Eddie Goldman at his peak. Like, he could be a difference maker, not just a guy that held his gap and allowed the linebackers to make plays. He could be a disruptor. What the Bears are really looking for in the 3-tech, and might as well transition here to our current Bears and the guy who's going to fill that role, Justin Jones here, who guys like we all know, everyone knows this. He's not Larry Ogunjobi. Wasn't the Bears' first choice.
Right.
But man, is he had that same shoes need to be filled though. And for this Bears defense, arguably the most important defensive position on the field, outside of like the nickel corner and that Will linebacker. Will, for you, Justin Jones, and we did our top 10, right? We did our top 10 defensive players. I mean, how are we feeling about that position? And then just some of the other guys in Tier 1.
Yeah, absolutely. I know doing both lines in one episode makes for some crunch time conversation here. So real quickly on Justin Jones, my biggest question just entering the season for him is whether or not he can be that impactful player in the backfield that the Bears are hoping for. I know last year he had 3 sacks, 5 quarterback hits, and 5 tackles for a loss. And that was due to missing, I think, 6 games. The first 5 weeks he missed due to a calf injury, and then he missed 1 game later in the season being on the COVID list. So taking those stats and just thinking about what they can look like in a more full-time role, maybe he gets a handful of sacks and a few more tackles for a loss. I still don't know if he's going to make the jump that the Bears are hoping for. That's why I ranked him 10th out of my top 10. I know you had him, Nick, just a little bit higher. A couple of players that perhaps I'm a little higher on, although I say that I didn't have Muhammad in my top 10, but he and Trevis Gipson being a part of that defensive end rotation excite me. Both of them had, Muhammad had 6 sacks, Gipson had 7. They each had 7 tackles for a loss last season, identical tackle numbers, both in the mid-40s. And what excites me more about Gipson is the fact that he mirrors all Muhammad's stats in about half of the snaps. Yeah. So if he can go out there in a more full-time role, I couldn't imagine exactly what type of potential the Bears could tap into with some better coaching up front. Him also going back into a hand or dirt rusher like he did in college should be a seamless transition. And that's why I think at the end of the season, when we're looking at Bears that surprise folks or took that next step, it's going to be Gipson, because he did it from year 1 to year 2. Huge leap. And if he can just take another steady step, another sign of progression, like his career and its trajectory is very enticing for a long-term stay here in Chicago.
Yeah, no, I have similar thoughts on Gipson and what he can do for this Bears defense, but we do have 2 other tiers we got to talk about, you guys, in terms of this defensive front. And like you said, Will, limited time because we still have the offensive line to talk about. So in Tier 2, we have Mike Pennell Jr., 9-year pro, Kyrus Tonga, who is now a former 7th-round pick in 2021. And then we have your guy there, Will, Dominique Robinson, rounding out Tier 2. I don't want to say like who out of these guys you have the most upside for, or who has potential most upside, but any intriguing players here that, hey, it maybe can do something in 2022 that we're not really expecting right now?
Yeah, so Dominique Robinson, the big talk about him coming out of the draft was him making that transition from wide receiver to edge player and doing it very well. That when you look at what he was able to do in a short amount of time, making such a drastic change, I'm excited about his potential. He has that elite athletic profile that the Bears can coach up. And I've been talking about it all offseason, how much I believe in his coaching staff to develop players better than the previous regime. And on top of that as well, when they released Jeremiah Tachu, that tells me something that they would expect Robinson to be a contributor sooner rather than later. And he's for a player that was able to go from edge to wide receiver. Now we get to see him make the transition from the MAC conference up to the NFL. So another test for him. And even if he's a player that is like your pass rush specialist this season, he's only out there for a handful of snaps, but in those obvious passing downs, passing situations, and his one job is to go after the quarterback. With his burst and his speed off the edge, I think he can thrive in that limited role right away. So that's the player out of this tier that that I would call like what, starred, circled, and underlined. Like he is the guy.
Makes sense. That's the guy I'm keen. And he's made some plays already in OTAs. And again, they're in shorts. They're not doing much, but that's kind of the group there.
That's what you want, though, too, right?
Exactly.
And that type of player, you've seen that historically in the NFL. Those are the type of players that have those attributes that can kind of come out of nowhere and make an impact quickly. So, again, with the defensive line coach, Travis Smith, he was in with the Raiders. He helped make Max Crosby into what he was. So you add him with Justin Hines, and then what Eberflus and is it Alan Williams is the new defensive coordinator?
Yep.
Defensive coordinator. I'm sorry. Just the combination of that. I think I'm going to keep coming back to this with coaching because this is not an indictment on the previous coaching staff from top to bottom. I'm just saying coaching matters, especially with a roster like this. And a player like that, you get the most out of them. I mean, Matt Peck's over here with Bulls. Big Dave always comes in and calls me coach. So that's where I'm going to come from today. You've got to coach the effort part of this. And everyone's trying hard, But these guys, they have to bring it every day, Monday through Saturday, to prepare themselves mentally, physically, spiritually, and then on Sunday, when the opportunity comes, they have to take advantage of that. And if they do that, the floor for this Bears team is much higher than everyone's predicting. If the defensive line can get pressure, if they can cause the other team to give the ball away, like Will was just saying, like you've said earlier with Robert Quinn, not just getting sacks, but being able to force fumbles, that's where this team can stay in games. And Justin Fields and the other players who are, you'd say the skill positions that they're gonna get points on the board, that's where we can stay in games and maybe win a few more than people are expecting.
Yeah, and there's a lot of competition on this roster, and when you have a lot of competition, it breeds the best out of every individual. So we'll see that kind of hopefully come to fruition as this season plays out. Real quickly, guys, we're going to list off some of the guys in Tier 3 and keep this conversation rolling. And to round this last group for the defensive line, we have Sam Kamara, guy that appeared in 8 games last season, LaCale London, Charles Snowden, who I know a lot of fans love Charles Snowden. And maybe we can discuss him a little bit here. He just doesn't quite fit what the Bears are doing here. And then I'm going to attempt to say this individual's name, and I apologize in advance. Yeah, thank you, Will. Awuzie Alufohai. Yeah, that's about as best you're going to get. I'm sorry. But he signed with the Bears practice squad towards the end of 2021 season and appeared in 3 games as a rookie in 2020. So there you go. Then you have Michael Treadway, a UDFA out of Minnesota, and maybe the one guy that people are a little bit more familiar with on this list is Carson Taylor, and only because he's made some plays against Teven Jenkins, who was on the second team as tackle in the OTAs. But those kind of round out Tier 3, and instead of going to a deep discussion about Tier 3 guys that most likely won't be here, I just want to know, we talked about all these players and we discussed some of our thoughts, but what is in your guys' eyes, a successful season for the defensive line? Like I mentioned at the top, no Khalil Mack, no Akeem Hicks, guys that really need to prove themselves, and names that if you look at every other roster, it's like, that's your Tier 1. Those are your guys for your depth pieces. If one guy's out, if Robert Quinn's not here, this defensive line takes a huge blow. But what is kind of a successful season in your guys' eyes for this defensive line with the players that they have right now?
Oh, that's a big question that I was not expecting at this juncture of the show, Nick, but I appreciate the challenge. I would say a successful season would be, I would love to see this team end up top 10 in sacks. I know you can throw in linebackers and other positional units coming in off of blitzes, but just overall, like with Robert Quinn coming off the season that he did, the ascension I'm expecting from Trevis Gipson, the solid play that Al-Quadin Muhammad has always demonstrated throughout his career, those 3 pass rushers alone are enough to me to get it, that kind of potential. Mario Edwards being that backup 3 tech outside of Justin Jones, Angelo Blackson. We already have seen that when he's on his A game, he can live in the backfield too. So a team that's in top 10 in sacks, I would say, really good against the run, but I don't expect them to be great. And then out of there, I guess that would probably warrant a much larger conversation, at least on my end, to determine what those specifics are. But overall, I want them to go after quarterbacks, and I want them to at least be formidable against the run. They don't have to be top 10, although I will not complain, but anywhere like top 12-ish would be like kind of where the bar I'd set right now.
What about you, Jake? Any expectations for this defense?
Expectations, or maybe like a goal for them, for me, in my eyes, success would look like this. We're not just saying, wow, Robert Quinn really stood out on this Bears defensive line. What success looks like for this defensive line to me in that unit would be each week a different person steps up. As the season progresses and you get to the end of it, there's maybe a few players that really made an impact on the year, and you're looking back and saying, wow, this guy is someone that we can count on into the future. And maybe this guy is too, and you see flashes of it. And so it's not just like, I still don't know what we've got, and we're sitting here at the end of the 22 season, and we're like, shit, I don't know if anything, I feel better about this unit as I did going into the year. That's what I don't want to happen.
I like that a lot. I'll add to this real quickly. For the defensive line, as long as they're not a liability, And so for this defense to function, where you need people to make these stunts effectively to free up the linebackers, if even they're not getting the sack numbers, and Eberflus actually been pretty good at generating, or the defense generating sacks without having the big name guys. So that could play out here where the Bears don't have a lot of big name guys. That's success in my eyes, because this is only the first year Eberflus and this defense getting together, and they will add players, more capable players in the years to come. But that could be a key for me. Will, you have something?
Yeah, just when you look at the roster overall, like Robert Quinn, he's not going to be here that much longer. As much as you and I like Angelo Blackson, he does turn 30 this season, so his window is very limited. Justin Jones has a lot to prove. Mario Edwards, I don't expect to be here long either. So, like Jake said, a few of these younger players needed to give us glimpses and signs that they're able or willing to take that next step so the Bears can feel comfortable with them moving forward, even though just looking at this positional group, work's going to continue to be needed, next offseason and perhaps for the one after as well. You can't be too deep on either side of the ball when it comes to the line, and this is no exception. It's been a strength of the Bears for a long time, and I don't think it would be anymore. And you mentioned one more fact that I want to hit on. They don't need the sack numbers as long as they're getting after the quarterbacks, getting pressures, making them force some throws. And with the secondary that we already previewed that we're kind of high on, allow them to make some plays by some misfortunate opportunities that those opposing quarterbacks are having to make because the defensive line is giving them no other option to.
That's a really good call too, because the run defense as well, I think, is really important. And I know that's something in Indy that was something that they could hang their hat on. Yep. And so if you don't allow those explosive plays out of nowhere, we've seen that as Bears fans throughout the years. You're like, whether it be a huge pass or whatever, but like a run that one just guts you, right? You're like, shit, where did that 60-yard, like, we've held him in check for 2.5 quarters, and then that shit happens? And, like, that cannot happen. And if, like you said, if they can just not be a liability, then that makes this team a different team. And that means as a fan, as a Bears fan, and if you do really care about this season and you believe, hey, screw what everyone says and the noise on the outside, this team can put it together and somehow make a run, and Justin Fields is dynamic and they can somehow put it all together, then you want them to make an impact, and you do care about this season, and you do want some of those veteran players to have great years and the younger ones step up. But if you are just focusing on, okay, if they just get 4 or 5 wins and there's progress, that's fine too. But, like, we need to see progress.
Yeah, we're not going to tell you how to – I know Luke Stuckmeyer always said, we're not going to tell you how to cub. We're not going to tell you how to bear, right, this season. You do whatever you find your way to enjoy the season, you do you. But all great points to keep in mind as we're watching 2022 unfold. We're going to get to the offensive line now, the other side of the trenches. But before we do, I have to tell you about PointsBet. The best way to support CHGO is to download the PointsBet app and use code CHGO when you sign up. If you do that right now, you'll get 2 risk-free bets up to $2,000. But that's not it. If you make a $50 or more first-time deposit, you'll receive a free CHGO membership, which unlocks all of our web content. And if you see the stream right here on YouTube, you can see Will is rocking the PointsBet hat. Looks good on him. And you'll even get a free shirt of your choice from the CHGO locker. That's $2,000 in free bets, a free CHGO membership, and a free t-shirt from the CHGO locker, all for making more than a $50 first-time deposit at PointsBet. If you have any questions, you can email pointsbet@allchgo.com, and we'll help you out. Your home for live in-play betting just got even better. See an edge in the game you're watching? Is your favorite team primed for a comeback? Hopefully the Bears can say that this season. And don't just watch the game. Bet along with it live. More live betting, more live markets, and faster live cash outs. Follow along with your bets the moment they hit and stay in the live action all game long. Download that PointsBet app right now and use that promo code CHGO. So what are you waiting for? I just told you everything about PointsBet. You better go do it and download it right now. It's time to elevate your live betting game. Once the game starts, don't just bet. Live your bet life with PointsBet. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem and wants help, call 1-800-GAMBLER for crisis counseling and referral services.
All right, and I have our play of the week from PointsBet. So I was scouring through my app this morning wondering, how can I win people some money? And I have 2 possible plays that you can do. I wish you can combine them, but unfortunately they're for the same game and there isn't a same game parlay for it right now. Maybe that'll change later on, but it's about the MLB All-Star game tonight. So here are the two plays that I would make. I would choose the outright winner, and I would choose the American League. They've won the last 8. The American League has only lost this game 3 times since 96. That's sitting at a minus 105 right now. I go ahead, earn some money, win it. I take a chance on it. And then the other one, I would go on the under of 7.5 that they set. Only in the last 5 years have the game gone over 8 runs, just once in the last 5 years. So if you're looking at trends, like I like to look at trends in history, those two definitely look to be some easy bets here tonight. And that under for 7.5 is at a negative 110. So again, not like getting a lot of return, but I think solid bets that should be able to pay off dividends at the end of the night. And Nick, you better win some money tonight.
I'm on a low streak right now in terms of betting. But did you guys hear that if the All-Star game is tied, like they'll have a home run derby?
Really?
Like afterward? Yeah, I forgot which MLB reporter tweeted that out. I'm like, wow, that's interesting.
Then take the National League, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and shout out to our very own Casey, who is all about picking the correct home run derby champion. She did it again last night with Soto, made some money with PointsBet, and you can do the same. And I'll also say this, for everyone that's in this chat, if you're on YouTube right now, whether you're going to listen on the podcast, whatever, give us your thoughts on what we're talking about with these position groups. Give us that like. We want you to be a part of this, and we're going to definitely take some of your questions later too.
For sure. And I know a lot of people are going to have plenty of questions when it comes to this Bears offensive line, which we're going to talk about right now. And let's start with the first tier. And here are the players that we have in the tier 1 of the Bears offensive line. You got Larry Borom, Teven Jenkins, Lucas Patrick, and Cody Whitehair. So those are the guys. And one of those guys wasn't even playing on the first team offensive line come 2 weeks ago, which being Teven Jenkins. And Larry Borom is not a guaranteed either, but that's what the Bears are working with right now. Guys, I mean, I don't even know where to start this discussion with the current offensive line. That's only 4 players, too. We don't even have a 5th in terms of a starting line. Will, where's your head at in terms of the guys that are in tier 1 and what the Bears have to work with?
I thought you and I were both feeling pretty generous today by throwing in Jenkins and Borom in tier 1, just because, like you said, they're not guaranteed starters right now, just based off of all the variables that are still in play for this unit. If that was the case, we'd only have a Lucas Patrick and Cody White here in the top tier for your offensive line. And we've been doing the series for 7 years. I don't think we've ever had 4. I think we've always at least had these starting 5 like listed up here. And for the first time, we don't really have a clear path into like even what that is. Like we mentioned Borom and Jenkins, but Jenkins hasn't been really starting in OTAs. Borom has, but who knows? Maybe they'll flip-flop. But outside of this, we've talked about it a few times on this show. In terms of Lucas Patrick, I'm a big fan of the leadership that he brings to the table here for that Bears offensive line unit. I think that is something that Cody Whitehair, unfortunately, has been lacking in his time in Chicago, is just being that alpha on the offensive line that I think Ryan Pace back in the day expected him to grow into as that center up front, and he just hasn't become that. So him going to guard too, or staying there should be, I guess, okay. I don't know. He's a fine player. He just had a bad year the last couple of seasons, but he and Lucas Patrick are by far the ones I feel the most comfortable with heading into the season. Jenkins, the fact that you guys haven't seen him playing with the first team in a while is a little alarming. Larry Borom, for the 5th round pick that he was last year, played very solid. He can still elevate his game, and just because he was picked in the 5th round, I'm not going to cap my expectation for him. I do expect him to take a leap forward this year. Personally, I expect him to start. But when I just look at that first tier, I'm still, unfortunately, slightly underwhelmed. And for Justin Fields in his very important year coming up, that's not the feeling we should have at the moment or that we want to have.
You know, I'm going to go full on, meathead take here, again, to take something from our Bulls guys. But you need this in this offensive line unit more than you need it in any other unit. Yep. here's the thing. I know that the offensive scheme, it's all going to be about being well conditioned, running and getting out and getting blocks in space. It's not like old school, like, oh, so I can't be super meathead here. But I'll tell you this, it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean you have to be soft, okay? So when you have 5 offensive linemen here, right, and they're all playing like this, that's not a great team. They have to be together as one. And when they are, then you punch the opponent in the face and you kick their ass play after play. And then you get up and you do it again. And you're well conditioned and you do that through the week so that on Sunday, when the game is over, the other team is wondering what the hell happened, why are we so sore, and why did we just lose this game? It's because the other team just beat our ass up front. And that's what you want as a Bears fan, and that's what we need, and we've got to do that. And I don't know if that's going to be this year, but maybe this is the foundation and the start of it. And I'd like to think that if there are Bears fans out there, if there are Bears players out there, if there's staff, that's what they want to do too. And we have to believe in that as Bears fans and not just say, let's hope that it happens, or let's just wait for this in a few years. Like, we demand that, and we need it. So let's get it.
And Jake, I don't remember the last time the Bears offensive lines had that type of mentality.
A while.
Right? Where going into a game, like, the Bears may not win it, but their offensive line is the opposing defense is going to feel its presence. I don't remember the last time the Bears offensive line has had that. And are there guys maybe capable of that on this offense? Maybe. Yeah. And we're going to have to see with this scheme if they can kind of unleash that to help the running backs that are one of the strengths of the Bears.
Exactly.
So it would be paramount for this unit, even if it doesn't have the most quality players, can it play to the scheme and can it play nasty? Because that's exactly what this offensive line is going to need to do if you're going to want Justin Fields to have any success.
And we're not even talking about throwing the ball right now, but what you just said, you answer the question. It's simple. Do you believe that Montgomery, Herbert, and Fields can be dynamic on the ground?
Yes.
And that's one thing we can hang our hat on as Bears fans. So if that's the case, let's start from there and then work our way out.
I like that. I like that a lot.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned, unleashing the dog, find that mentality. If you're looking at tier 1, I think there are 2 players that have proven they have it. Teven Jenkins in college. We saw it on tape. That's why you and I, Nick, were salivating all over the prospect of getting him, mocked him to the Bears. Here he is. I still have hope that he can rekindle that flame, find it. Once the pads come on, and if Teven Jenkins doesn't show out and turn up, then we have a problem. But that's what I'm waiting for out of him. And then Lucas Patrick, too. You'll see what he did in Green Bay. He's someone that always played with that kind of attitude, that energy. And whenever there was someone in front of him, or maybe there wasn't and he had no one to block, this dude found someone to go punish. Like, he's a headhunter. He's always looking for someone to hit on every single play. And I think he's a vocal leader, and he's also a tone-setting physical leader for this offensive line right up front. And out of the top tier, if we're looking for like that mentality, those are the 2 guys that embody it more than anyone. And Ryan Pohl said it all the way back at the combine. Like, those are the type of players that we need up front. And so hopefully Jenkins can figure that out and get out there, because we need players like him.
Yeah, you know what? Something that just stuck out, and I'll take a breath here and settle down a little bit, but I'm getting fired up. We're getting closer to kickoff. But, like, Lucas Patrick did an interview with Jeff Joniak and Tom Thayer, Bears All Access, shortly after he arrived in Chicago. And I like some of the things he said. He said, you don't just show up on Sundays and win in the NFL. It's kind of that preparation thing that we talked about. But something that really stuck out to me is, and something we haven't hit on yet, is that relationship with the center and quarterback.
Huge.
You look back at the greats all time, and that's always, it seems to be there, right? Where there's something there. And I think what he was saying in that interview to them is, Aaron Rodgers set this thing, consistency, and he set a standard. And what Lucas Patrick did was support him. And he talked about with Justin Fields. He said, I'm going to echo or reinforce what Justin Fields is doing. He said, I'm there to support him in whatever his message is and whatever he brings, and I'll be the first guy to jump right behind him and echo what he's saying to the group. And I think that right there is what you want. And I'm not saying it's going to be all rainbows and unicorns and it's going to be perfect, but that's the mentality you want. And if he can back it up, and you mentioned before, when's the last time that we could say that about an offensive line where, we're aggressive and hungry? It's been a while, And I know injuries and health are a big part of that, but cohesion, belief as a unit, talent and skill too. But like it got to start with the quarterback. And if you believe in Justin Fields more than you believed in Mitch Trubisky or more than you believed in Jay Cutler, then that can be a determining factor in the success of this offense.
No doubt about it. No doubt about it. One last thing I'll add to Lucas Patrick before we move to Tier 2. Like, he was the one that said that football is not a contact sport. It's a collision sport. So you knew right then and there. That was in his introductory press conference. Like, okay, this is exactly what the Bears needed on their offensive line and at the center position. So, obviously taking on a bigger role being with the Bears and having a Hall of Fame quarterback in Aaron Rodgers that can help you out in diagnosing things. But you like the mentality right from the get-go with a Lucas Patrick. Moving on to Tier 2 now with this Bears offensive line, we have Braxton Jones, who has been getting reps with the first team at left tackle, is kind of just splashed onto the scene. And we'll talk about him a little bit more here. You also have Julian Davenport, Zachary Thomas, another one of those draft picks this year. Dakota Dozier, who unfortunately went on IR with season-ending knee injury in June. And then you also have Sam Mustipher, who was starting for the Bears last season at center for the 2021 season. Guys, there's some interesting names in this group, specifically when I say like a Braxton Jones, because at the left tackle spot right now, wide open. When we talked about two tackles in the first group, but Will, just in Tier 2, guys that intrigue you and just your overall thoughts on the players that we just mentioned.
Yeah, you've seen Braxton Jones participate. I haven't had the privilege to do that just yet. That's what I'm excited for to camp, is to see him a little bit more. I know coming out of school, there's a lot to like about his size and length and just like those physical attributes, but there's a lot of those fundamental work that coaches needed to kind of hammer out here at the next level. So until you get the pads on, I don't know if we'll have a strong idea exactly where he stacks up. You can get somewhat of an idea in shells, but when it really just takes those full pads to get a stronger understanding. Julian Davenport, someone that I'm still going to say I'm okay with being here. I'm not going to say I'm high on him by any means, but he's a solid swing tackle veteran presence for this team. Coming from the Colts, so he has familiarity with Matt Eberflus, and he's just always been, that backup that is a high-end backup, but he isn't going to be someone that you expect to go out there and start. Zachary Thomas is someone, too, where it's I need to learn a little bit more about him on the field. Like, you see what he did in college, but how does that translate? I know you threw Sam Mustipher on here. We all know him. I don't think I need to say much about him right now. We saw what he did last year. Hopefully he can continue to prove his case to make this team. I think he has a lot to prove here in this training camp. But yeah, that's really about it, Nick. The only funny thing I had was, the Bears have Zachary Thomas and the Packers have Zach Tom that they drafted, both offensive linemen. So I thought about that Winnie the Pooh meme of like him and then like the classy version of himself. Like Zach Tom? No, like Zachary Thomas. That's the only thing I had, really.
I like that. Yeah, Zachary Thomas, too, is interesting just because he was a guy that played tackle at San Diego State, and he was actually lining up at left guard in OTAs. When Lucas Patrick was out, they had they just were missing a bunch of their starters, right, that they had, and Zachary Thomas was there. Not that means anything going into 2022, but he has made that transition from tackle to guard. But to honestly keep this conversation going, because, Will, we have some over and unders, some season predictions that we need to get to, and we're just going to mention some of the guys in Tier 3 real quickly, and then I have a bigger picture question at the end here. Tier 3, you have Jatari Carter, again, a 7th-round draft pick in this past draft. Doug Kramer, another draft pick. What was that, four already that I've mentioned? Lachavious Simmons, Willie Wright, Dieter Eastland, Sean Coleman, and Gene DeLance to kind of round out Tier 2, Tier 3. But here's one question. People in the comments, please chime in on this. Do you feel better about the line this season going into Week 1? And we don't know what that's even going to look like compared to what it was in Week 1 against the Rams. And for those who don't remember, here's the starting line. You had left tackle Jason Peters. You had left guard Cody Whitehair, Sam Mustipher at center, right guard James Daniels, and then Jermaine Ifedi at right tackle. Yeah. Right now, with the guys that you have, do you feel better about the line going into Week 1 against the San Francisco 49ers?
Yes. The answer for me is yes. I don't know if it's an overwhelming but part of it is Jason Peters was new. He's learning a lot. What he was able to do, given the situation last year, thank God for Jason Peters.
Yeah.
The fact that there's a new coaching staff, the fact that I keep coming back to that, the fact that Ryan Pace is no longer here means that when you look at what the roster is, and you talked about Tier 1 and then you got into Tier 2 and 3, it means this. If you don't bring it as one of those projected starters, the opportunity exists for those new rookies, for those veterans that are there, for Sam Mustipher, for others. Like, it's there. And don't look back at what past opportunities are, how people are, and just put them in a box. Because people can work, and people can work their ass off and develop into a better player. And in this scheme and what's going on with new opportunities, it may just be something where they're way better than they were before.
Okay.
Well, we need talent. Yeah. I understand that.
No, for sure. Need talent, and there's going to be a lot of competition. Will, where are you at on this? Because I also see in the comments, too, it's like a hard question. And actually, Joey, is there a way to refresh it on the page here just to see what everyone's kind of saying? But, yeah, it's a tough question. I don't mean to just bring it up on you guys, but what are your thoughts?
I'm unfortunately, I think, leaning no, just because, I mean, Jason Peters, I know he came in late, but he's like a future Hall of Fame left tackle. So the floor is very high on him compared to we don't even know who's starting on the blind side right now. And we felt good about James Daniels. I was okay with a Jermaine Ifedi being a former first-round pick that was just not playing up to a standard, but he was serviceable. But right now, there are just so many question marks in terms of like who's starting. I have a hard time feeling more confident. Real quickly, though, I just have one fun fact that I did determine as I was going through this Tier 3. So Gene DeLance, the undrafted free agent out of Florida, I just want to let everybody know that he's the heaviest Bear on the team by 14 pounds. He's at 352, which is 14 more than Kyrie's Tonga at 338. So just figured people would want to know that heading to camp when you see, like, who's that big SOB for the Bears offensive line? That's Gene DeLance, the undrafted free agent out of Florida.
I have something here. Don't feel like we have to rush this conversation, okay? If we want to talk for the next hour about the Bears, we could do that, all right? We don't have to move on and because this is important. So if we want to dive into things and you guys want that and people are out there, you know, it's like a suggestion box, right? Mm-hmm. How do you feel like the Bears offensive line can be the best versions of themselves this year? Like, tell us what you think, because guess what? No one knows for sure. Like, none of us are predicting, have the perfect prediction of what would happen. So everyone's guess is probably as good as the next person.
Very true. To answer this question, you guys, I'm going to go with no heading into week 1 for this Bears as it stands. And I think right now, Sam Mustipher is your starting right guard until they make a personnel decision to add somebody else in undersized right guard at that. But we just need to see how these two tackles, whoever's playing tackle, actually can do in training camp in pads. But you hope to see Teven Jenkins, like you were mentioning, Will. If Teven Jenkins doesn't show that physicality, that nastiness in training camp to where he can move in space, be able to seal the edge, what they're looking for, what Chris Morgan is looking for, then that's a red flag. And I know it's just training camp, but we need to see it. We just need to see him put somebody on their ass and be like, there's that second-round draft pick. That's the guy that they drafted, moved up to go get. Need to see it. If it's Braxton Jones at left tackle, let's see they can be capable of blocking, hopefully a Robert Quinn that will be there. Maybe they'll put Trevis Gipson on him. He hasn't had those opportunities, really, to even go up against those guys, but it'll be in pads this time.
Right.
So there's just too many question marks for me. Going into week 1 against San Francisco. But
great opponent.
Nick Bosa is going to be there. There's going to be some quality pass rushers there as well, and it is a good 49ers defense. So maybe come middle of the season, maybe that changes a little bit as we see this. I think the offensive system, look, the Bears coaching staff have preached how the offensive scheme is going to be huge for everybody.
Right.
So even though they don't have the talent, the scheme, the X and O's can help out the deficiencies there. So maybe that makes a difference even though they don't have the quality players.
definitely.
And good coaches can scheme around the talent that they have on the roster. We have not seen that. I hope Bears fans did not forget that that's a fact. That's how you're successful in this league. And hopefully we're going to get there sooner rather than later. You mentioned Teven Jenkins. You mentioned Sam Mustipher, right guard. What do you put a percentage on this? What % chance do you believe either Larry Borum or Teven Jenkins bumps in the guard this season? It doesn't have to be week 1, but this season. Is it a 50-50 shot, 40-60? I feel like the chances are decent considering when you look at just the talent we have here and you're trying to get your best 5. We've heard that all offseason, your best 5 on the field. How do you do that? And is it putting one of them at guard?
Man, we're asking all the tough questions here on the CHGO Bears podcast when it comes to this Bears offensive line. Percentage-wise, I think you will see one of those guys get reps there. Yep. And man, if it comes down to Teven Jenkins and trying to get the best out of him, moving him into right guard, Matt Eberflus left it open. He was asked that question. He didn't say yes, he didn't say no, but they're considering all options, I think, how he put it, which what does that really mean anyway? But I would say it's like a 60% chance for Teven Jenkins that at some point he might get some reps at right guard. And
I'm going to go high. I'm going to say 90% chance.
Okay.
And part of that is what we've talked about. Health plays a big part in this.
True.
But what, Will, you hit on it. Development was my theme today that I wanted to bring. I've been shouting. And cohesion, right? And so the coaches will develop. The players can have a cohesive group. But a big part of that is the opportunity to play with each other for an extended period of time. And part of the equation there, the biggest part, is health. So can you stay healthy, and are you performing? That's probably right there with health.
Yep.
But we want to see a group stick together, perform pretty well, or very well in time, and stay healthy. And being able to do that, all those factors kind of are together. And I know it's not part of the offensive line group, but the one other thing I did want to hit on is this. And I think that the Bears front office and the coaching staff actually have a premium on this as well, or put a premium on that. And that's the tight ends, and I think especially the wide receivers blocking downfield. Oh, yeah. And I think that is something that when all working together as 11 players on the field, that's how we have success. It's not about one player doing it all. It's not about one or two players. It's everyone doing their job at the same time over and over again, and then bursts happen from those playmakers. And that's the recipe for success in my eyes from where I sit as a Bears fan.
One more point I want to make here, too, is I mentioned, coaches can put these players in a position to succeed. Another way, on top of just general scheme, will be play calling. And Luke Getsy has a very important job coming up this season to put Justin in the best position to succeed, which is also going to mean his linemen. So if there is a mismatch on either of the tackles, don't leave them hanging. Don't leave them on that island. Throw in a tight end, a chip, help them out. If someone's being beaten, let's make some adjustments. Let's get a double team in place. Even if that means we need to keep a running back in for pass protection, you got to do what you have to do to protect number one, out there in the backfield and Justin. And I know we didn't see enough of that last year. I mean, you can look at that Cleveland game as a great example of what not to do when it comes to mismatches up front. You want to find ways to mitigate those. They're going to happen with the premier players that we have at these defensive line positions across the league. You're going to be overmatched, but as a play caller, it's up to you to figure out ways around those mismatches. And that's what Luke Getsy's job is going to be. And if he does a decent job, he can overcome some deficiencies that the Bears may have on their offensive line.
I like it, Will. Before we kind of get to our last segment of the show, any last comments that we have on tier 1, 2, or 3 in the offensive linemen? Are we good? Because I want to make sure everyone gets everything out there.
Any chat? Anything from the chat
there?
there?
Chat? Not seeing anything as of now. I
see A-Rob blocked with intensity that was needed last year. We'd have seen a few massive plays out of Justin's legs. So there you go. I appreciate the support there on the wide receivers downfield. It doesn't directly relate to the
and the guy
line
that they just brought in, N'Keal Harry, is he was the 4th ranked PFF receiving, run blocker as a receiver. So
it helps. You get everybody involved. It doesn't matter. If you're a wide receiver, tight end, running back, all get involved in the run game and blocking. I will mention one thing because I know a lot of I've seen it before. One of the tier 3 guys that we have on there, Dieter Eastland. maybe a wild card there for being somebody that can kind of make a role as a backup interior right guard. And look, the Bears currently don't have one, so I'm just going to throw that name out there because I know there's some Dieter Eastland fans amongst you Bears fans.
I also believe one of the 3 drafted rookie offensive linemen, one of the 3 by the end of this season will say, hey, we have something there. I'm not going to go on Jenkins and Bourne from last year. I'm counting on them both to be quality this year and develop. But one of those 3 that they drafted, I think, could stand out. And, hey, in the long term, maybe all 3 have a chance. But it would not shock me if that's the case.
Anything, Will?
Oh, no, I was just pointing at you as a Dieter fan. That's all.
Oh, yeah, maybe it's just me. I'm shouting out all the Dieter Eastland fans, a.k.a. me. Then maybe he's someone to look out for. All right, you guys. Our next partnership is one of my personal favorites, Owen, which stands for Only What You Need. This brand is a 100% plant-based protein company that gives you high-quality and carefully selected ingredients to keep you functioning throughout your entire workday and especially after an intense workout or a CHGO softball game. Definitely a good thing to have afterwards. In these protein shakes, you get your vegan omega-3s, your green superfoods like broccoli, kale, and spinach, and all these amazing ingredients reinforce what Owen stands for, Only What You Need. I've been using Owen for the last 2 years. We've been taking it here at CHGO. Everyone's hooked, and if you're looking for a recommendation, look, the Pro Elite Chocolate Shake is high-end, but also the salted caramel.
I like
that.
That's
one,
good.
That's a second choice from honestly, I can't. Whatever's available, I'll take, but those 2 are definitely my favorite.
You saying they're all tier 1?
Yeah, they would all be tier 1. Those 2 specifically. Actually, you could put all of Owen in.
I think
tier
strawberry banana for me is tier 1. Awesome.
Yeah, that one's up there too. So they're all tier 1 Owen shakes. You can't go wrong. And what's cool is that I first heard about Owen from a guy that you guys all know, Chicago Bears quarterback Justin Fields, who does follow a plant-based diet. You drink enough Owen shakes, you'll look like Justin Fields. I mean, that's
Promise?
I don't know. I can't
It's
promise.
a part of the equation.
Yeah, it's part of
Okay.
the equation. Owen and CHGO have partnered up to give you an awesome offer. When you use the code CHGO20, you get 20% off your first purchase at liveowen.com. Again, that is 20% off with the code CHGO20 at liveowen.com. So join us here at CHGO and Justin Fields and try Owen, Only What You Need.
All right, Chicago sports fans, if you aren't a member of our CHGO family, what are you waiting for? Members will have access to premium content from all of our great writers, including Nick Moriano, Will DeWitt, Adam Hogue, Kevin Kadek will have some stuff in there throughout the Bears season 2. We've got all the other teams in town and great contributions there. You get a free T-shirt of your choice when you become a member, so do it. Get your access to the members-only Discord, which I've been doing a little bit more of lately. I really like that. Can really do some different things and have be surrounded by some like-minded, diehard Chicago sports fans, which is really, really cool and kind of block out the noise of the periphery of the trolls that may be on other type of social platforms. It also, of course, we have our podcast. We have our live shows on every team every day. So come join this amazing family that is constantly growing here at CHGO and go become a member today.
Yeah, and Jake, you're our GM. So if the general manager is like out here actively recruiting you and you're hearing him talk right now, don't delay. Head over to allchgo.com. Join what we're all doing and building over here literally today. Like, don't mess with Jake. All right.
It is. I'm demanding it, but I'm also just really asking it because this place is very special to a lot of us. We all put in a lot of time and effort to try to bring you the best Chicago sports coverage we can, whether it be the Bears, what you're watching right now or listening to, or any of these other teams. We all care tremendously about what we're doing, and I see it day in and day out since we've launched. We're going to continue this thing. And really looking forward to the fall with the Bears season, especially, as you can tell, someone who is passionate about all things Bears.
100%. And Nick and I have always said on this show for years, like, our dream is to turn this into a full-time job. And this year, everyone has been able to make that possible. And by joining our family, you're allowing not just Nick and I to continue living out our dream, but everybody here at CHGO, because we're all in very similar boats. And it's great to be with a great group of guys these two here and everyone else that'll be on the channel later on here today. But guys, we're in the final segment of our show. I'm taking over the wheel right now. Nick is gracious enough to hand it over. And I want to know, and we'll go defense real quick first, who makes the team? And Jake, if you don't have a list, that's more understandable. You can tell Nick and I where maybe we went wrong. And Nick, I'll hand it over to you first, and we'll start with defensive line. I did look in Indianapolis last year, get as a base point, a reference point for us. They kept 11 defensive linemen last year. That's a lot. Do you have the same number?
I don't have the same number. I thought that was a little high on the list of defensive alignment. But here, I'll give you my 10 real quick. Robert Quinn, Justin Jones, Angelo Blackson, Trevis Gipson, Alquan D. Muhammad, Mario Edwards Jr., Kairos Tonga, Dominique Robinson. I have Mike Pennell. And then there was a split here. First it was Carson Taylor, the one UDFA out of Arizona, or Sam Kamara. But now I'm gonna make the decision right now. I'm going to put Sam Kamara over Carson Taylor to round out the 10.
Okay, so we have the same exact 10. Congratulations. We can keep this one a little bit simple. So Mike Pennell, we didn't get to talk about too much when we were talking about Tier 2. He is a 9-year pro. He was with the Bears last year, and I know it was referenced on the show that he was cut, so that you have to take that in equation, and he did play his 2 years previous to that with Kansas City, so that was with Ryan Poles. The reason why he got cut last year, and I forgot, he did get injured during training camp. So the Bears let him go with an injury settlement. It was supposed to be Pennell and Tonga kind of duking it out for that backup nose tackle spot. And maybe that injury is a blessing in disguise because it allowed Tonga to get some earlier reps, to develop maybe a little bit quicker than your typical 7th round rookie. But he's a very solid player that I expect to make this team. He had 21 or more tackles every single season since 2017. He's a bigger body, space eater. He is not the most impactful defensive lineman in terms of getting into the backfield and making plays, but he can hold the line, hold his own, and in a rotation be effective. And that's the role that I would expect out of him, and why I anticipate Pennell making the team this year.
And the Bears did cut Jeremiah Atachu to make room for Mike Pennell too, so it kind of indicates what they kind of thought about him and who they had to get rid of ultimately to bring him onto the roster.
I look
100%.
at Mike Pennell and I say, I will follow you into battle if you're another Bears player on defense. Like, you do the dirty job and occupy the space, and we will fly around you. And there's a guy on that second level there named Roquan Smith, who may just be one of the best defensive players in all of the land. And so having a guy like that up front could be vital to his success.
Don't tell PFF, the Pro Bowl voters, as well as those who vote for the All-Pro. Other than that, you're right. Yeah. He is one of the best linebackers on the land. We may be slightly biased, but also I don't think it's that far-fetched whatsoever. We'll switch it to the offensive line now. I looked at two teams, Nick, the Packers, because of Luke Getsy. They kept 10 last year. And the Colts, just because that is something in which Eberflus has recent familiarity with. They kept 9. So very similar, and that's kind of standard around the league when you look around those numbers anyway. This one was a much tougher task. I'm sure you can agree. I'll give you who I have, and then you can tell me how it may differ. So I have Cody Whitehair, Lucas Patrick, Larry Borum, Teven Jenkins, Braxton Jones, no surprises yet, Julian Davenport. And now things get murky, and this could change so much between now and the end of training camp once we see them and the pads come on. But if I had to go with my gut today, Nick, Zachary Thomas will make this team. Sam Mustipher, I think, makes this team as a backup interior lineman that's versatile, can play guard or center. But Chavius Simmons, I'm going to go with it, makes the team. And then Jatir Carter is on my fringe. If Simmons gets cut, I can see Carter making the team. But if Simmons makes the team, then perhaps Carter starts on the practice squad. It's that bottom, man. It is a tough challenge to figure out who's actually going to stay.
Yeah, so your number ended at, was it 9, Will? Or was it 8?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, I'm going to 9 at Simmons. Carter would be 10 if they kept the 10th. But, man, that one hurts to even say with Simmons, but they got rid of Hambright so quick, but they kept Simmons along. I feel like that there's something to it, and maybe he's a camp body, but outside of like when you look outside of him, I don't know who would actually take that spot just yet. They have to earn it for me, and that's why I'm saying it now, because I haven't seen these guys practice yet in Chicago. They need to earn it. I know Simmons ... That's how I felt saying it.
Okay, I have 8 for me, and the same everybody. Okay, Borum, Whitehair, Patrick, Musford, Jenkins, Braxton Jones, Julian Davenport, Zachary Thomas. So I didn't go as far as I had like Simmons or go down that line, but yeah, I was almost looking to it. But like Dieter was on my list, Dieter Eastlund, but I was just kind of looking who out of these guys that I mentioned, Zachary Thomas could be a backup for the interior. Sam Musford is a backup for the interior. Jenkins, Jones, and Larry Borum. You have 3 tackles there. One of them's a backup. I don't know which one yet. And then you have Julian Davenport, who also plays that backup at tackle. So that's how I went with it for now. But and I did look at the Colts 2021 offensive line. So it looked like they had, I think, 8 actually make it, and then 2 on the reserve /COVID-19 list in terms of their official 53. So at one point they had 10, or they were going to get to that 10 number. So I'm too short, but maybe a different regime. We'll see what ends up happening. But that's the 8 I came up with.
Well, the good news is if it's 8 and my list ends after Mustapher, then everyone in the comments, we're good. We're square. It's easy breezy.
I have one thing to add to this, and that's there's a lot of practice-eligible players in that offensive line group, but I think we've talked about this before. What is progress? What does success look like, whether it be short-term or long-term? And something, if you look back with the general managers that have been here previously, with Ryan Pace or Phil Emery, maybe even Angelo at the end, whatever. Bears fans can back us up on this. There was this fact of the matter when a player was cut or a player was done here or the preseason ended and that happened, a lot of times those players would not be claimed. Those players would not show up on the other rosters. Those players would be done in the NFL. And that was something that said a lot. And I think when you're going to see progress is there's going to be some really tough decisions that are made, and there may be some good players that end up on other teams at the end of this preseason. And you want to see that year after year. You don't want to give up on the players that end up being really great on other teams. But you know what? That means that Ryan Poles is the right person. That front office collectively, and they're doing the scouting correctly. They're coming together. The coaching staff are developing players. And it's a culture. It's a place. It's an organization that others in the NFL respect how they're doing things and know that the players that are there are worth keeping an eye on for when they have needs, because undoubtedly there will be injuries across the league that happen over the course of July, August, and September.
Yeah, no doubt. And I see Doug Kramer in the comments here, Will, real quickly. And, practice squad guy, I think, initially, to start off. But, yes, I know. He actually got one first-team rep when Lucas Patrick wasn't practicing, and he was there alongside Zachary Thomas. But, yes, I feel you on the Doug Kramer in Illinois and being a Bears fan.
Yes.
Yep. He can start on a practice squad. We don't need to rush him. And the one thing I want to hit on to kind of piggyback off of Jake here is I just want to, give some kudos to Poles here for making this conversation as difficult, like Jake mentioned, because he attacked this position unit hard in that final day, just throwing, darts. We can go back to Adam's metaphor, just throwing darts at a dartboard with this, and that's great. And we need that because too many times in the previous years, they're just kind of complacent with it. It will be good enough. But you can't have too many good offensive linemen. You need to breed some serious competition. And I think we have it here. And that's what makes it very exciting entering training camp. Let's see, guys. Do you want to predict the starting 5 week 1?
Oh, man.
Does that even get more difficult? Maybe it's easier. We'll find out. I can give you my 5 to start if it helps.
Yeah. You do Please. That, Will. You make this.
I have it down, and I'm not going to change it. So I got left tackle Braxton Jones starting it off. I think he'll do enough. There's a reason why he's there. They're going to give him a serious look, and hopefully he can prove to be someone that can play outside of his draft status right away. Cody Whitehair at left guard, Lucas Patrick at center, Right guard, I'm going to go with Teven Jenkins. Week 1, they're going to want to find a way to get their best 5. That's going to be the only path forward I see. And then Larry Borum at right tackle. So 2 second-year players hunkering down the left side, a rookie on your left tackle, and then your stable veteran presence at left guard and center, and Whitehair and Patrick.
Jake, what do you got? Who do you think?
I'm going to second Will on that. I think that's a solid plan and maybe the most likely scenario. There are others that could certainly work, and for all the factors that we've talked about throughout today's show. But I like that approach to start the season.
Okay. Should I try to make this any different? But
what's another scenario?
So I don't think the right guard is on this roster right now.
Ooh.
I don't think and it's going to take maybe a surprise cut in training camp.
Tell me more.
Yeah, I think that's what it's going to end up, because I think Teven Jenkins is going to show that he's capable of playing right tackle and that physical presence, and he could be that guy that they envision here in Chicago, what they moved up for. And how they kind of structure the practices, Jenkins got the first 6 practices at right tackle. Larry Borum got the last 6. So just because Larry Borum had it last doesn't mean he's like the front runner to start at right tackle. And they're going to see with the pads who's best at that position. But to maybe mix it up, if they're going with 5 on this current roster, right tackle will be Teven, right guard will be Larry.
I like that.
And then it's almost very identical to what you guys are saying. But if there was, if they didn't have the right guard on this roster today, which I still don't think they do, that could be definitely in the works.
But you're telling me right now, week 1, left tackle is not a top-tier rookie, and you guys are okay with that. What round again?
5th.
That's right. I couldn't.
And
I knew it was.
I don't know if I'm all right with that.
Yeah.
But it might just be if Braxton Jones keeps consistently showing that this is not too big for him.
Yeah.
And every time he's spoken to me, it's like he's so calm,
Yeah.
cool, collective, and that shows. Just even in shorts, like
Right.
when Adam and I were watching him, it's like, well, Braxton didn't do anything wrong in that.
Right.
There's no pressure coming off the left side. And I get it. It's very early on, but if he can keep showing that, and then you'll have Nick Bosa opposite of you week
Right.
1, like it's not easy for any rookie, but if he can show that throughout training camp, you have to be all right with it.
Okay, you guys. The more we talk about it, the more I'm getting a little bit apprehensive. I'll be honest with you. But is there any scenario where Jenkins and Borum are each your starting tackles at the same time? Is there any? And maybe not, but is there any?
I leave all
If
options
they
open,
move Borum
right?
back, if they move Borum back, I don't see Jenkins being that left tackle. Like they tried it last year, but it did feel like once the new regime took over, they're like really adamant that was kind of a forced fit. And I think we thought that too last year. Like we thought he can be a more natural fit at right tackle instead of having to play on the blind side over there. So that may be it. But at the end of the day, like it has to be the best 5, and we'll see how it all shakes out. I don't know.
Such a question, man. Like I don't remember going into a Bears season how confused I've been about an offensive line. The starting 5 offensive line.
Right.
Like I don't remember ever being in this position not knowing what tackles are going to start, who's going to be at right guard, and what it's going to look like, maybe halfway throughout the season.
Yeah, I mean, I thought I was nervous going into last season about what was going to happen, but this is a whole nother level, really. And if you look at the chat real quick, a few people are chiming in. And what do we have here? We have it just updated, of course. But SW Outlander JE said Jones, Whitehair, Patrick, Jenkins, Borum for me. Dorn Shaver Sr. says trenches will determine Bears' destiny. Jones, Whitehair, Patrick, Jenkins, and Borum. If Borum can hold down the right tackle spot, Teven Jenkins would dominate in the run game at right guard, and that might be the perfect combination. That's from BC Always Right. So maybe you'll be right.
At this point, I don't think anybody knows, but it would be nice, like early on in training camp, as the days go by, consistently, like, hey, here's who's lining up in these spots. The next day, same 5. Oh, the next day, because that's always been like the thing with the Bears, like they'll switch something. Yep. There's no continuity, like you were talking about earlier, Jake. let's establish that continuity, that chemistry between, a line, and keep that going.
Gotta have it.
You're in the bubble.
Oh crap! I'm in the bubble and I'm there.
Not really sure how that one
It's
happened.
because that point he was right on. We needed to see him twice to talk about the cohesive unit there.
Oh,
There's
wow.
a
Cam's getting a
mini-me.
little funky here.
This
we
is,
got picture-in-picture neck.
Will, I believe Nick has a twin. That's what happened here. Yeah.
He just appeared and now he's gone.
You were like, I already told you I was crowded in this bubble, and then he just smushed me.
I like that though. That was funny.
All right, let's play some over-under real quick and get some just fun season predictions. So starting with defensive line, most of my over-under is defensive line just because statistically, like you can look at what they were able to accomplish more so than offensive linemen. So I'm setting the bar for Robert Quinn this year at 9.5 sacks. Remember, 18.5 a year ago. But does he go over or under 9.5 sacks? And Nick, I'll let you start it off and give Jake just a second to think about it.
I will go over. I think Robert Quinn is definitely capable of getting to double digits again. We talked about it. The scheme will help Robert Quinn. And for a good portion of the season, he didn't have Mac. So it's not like teams were allocating more to one side than the other. It was Quinn just doing it by himself. Quinn getting to the quarterback. So you said 9.5. I can see him getting 10.5, 11. If he's here, if he's here and can play, and I know you talked about it, Will, the fluctuating season in terms of sack production, but he's going back in a defense that works for him. Eberflus has gotten a lot out of players that not big name players. So I'll go 10.5, 11.
Okay, I'm personally taking the under in about 8. I just don't see him going back-to-back double digits and having Al-Quadin Muhammad and Trevis Gipson chomping at the bit to take on a larger role that could eat into it a bit. And again, Quinn only plays one side of the line, so his flexibility isn't really a strong suit for him. So the Bears could end up, having to put someone else out there to just give him a spell once in a while too. But I'm going to look at 8 just because of his career history is telling me that's probably more than likely the case. How about you, Jake? You going to take the over or under a 9.5 for Quinn?
For all the reasons you just said, I agree with you. I think it's going to be the under. I hope it's not. I hope it's the over, and I hope it's overwhelming and he has another historic season. But in some ways, it may not be a bad thing if he does have the under and if all those other players step up like you just said. So it's okay.
There we go. I'll go right back to you, Jake, then. Let's go for Trevis Gipson and Al-Quadin Muhammad. Last year, they combined for 13 sacks. Again, Gipson here in Chicago. Muhammad was over in Indianapolis as a full-time starter. Gipson only played like 400 snaps, but with their 13 combined last year, what about 14.5 sacks for them combined? Would you take the over or under on that?
Combined. Okay, combined.
I'm sorry, but I'm going to be pessimistic again. I'm usually optimistic. I'm going to go under because I think when you factor in 2 players into any bet, there's more variables you have to consider. So, and as we've talked about a lot at length, and I've said the word health and injury too much on today's show, that to me, if I'm making a bet, I'm going to say the under. Yet again, I hope it's over.
For me, Will, the thing is with those 2 players, Trevis Gipson could play both sides, but both of them primarily played left as opposed to Robert Quinn, who's exclusively on the right. So if they're both battling for that position, I could see Trevis Gipson getting more sacks than Al-Quadin, but Al-Quadin Muhammad's a better run defender. So I'm going to go under the 14, or was it 14.5? I think Trevis Gipson, though, individually will have more sacks than Al-Quadin Muhammad.
I agree with Nick there 100%. I think there's a scenario going to blow your mind here. I think that Gipson has more sacks than Quinn, but yet what you just said on that bet doesn't happen and the under takes place. Like, I really think that's a possibility. I don't know.
I like that, too. Yeah.
No, it's a very fair evaluation. Again, Gipson had 7 sacks last year, only had 400 snaps. It took Muhammad double the amount of snaps to also reach, I think he had 6. So he was one of the best pass rushers in the league on a snap-by-snap basis, Gipson was. So in a larger role, if he can play at that same level, it's going to be a hell of a lot of fun to watch next season. I'm going to take the over because I'm the optimist, and I feel like Gipson could hit double-digit sacks. And if Muhammad can just find 5, there we are. And I think those are both within the realm of possibility. One more over-under for the defensive line. I'm going to set it at 9.5 forced fumbles for the defensive line as an entire unit because we need those takeaways. They're being preached. Gipson had 5 last year off the top of my head. I think Quinn had a couple himself as well. So between them two, you're almost there. And again, this is defensive end and interior. Only 9.5. Where do you land, Nick?
Look, Eberflus has preached takeaways every time any ball carrier has had the ball in their hand. There's about 5 other defensive players looking to knock out that football. I think it's just more of an emphasis from everybody. And the defensive line, like Trevis Gipson, he learned from Quinn. He learned from Mac. Take the football away. That's the most important thing, not the sack. So I'll be optimistic. I'll go over. I'll say they get 10 forced fumbles.
I need a clarifier here. Yeah, okay, so it is. It's if you're looking at the stat, Pro Football Reference, it's FF, not FR. So we don't have to recover the fumble, correct? It's just a forced fumble. So if that's the case, yeah, it's going to be the over. And this team as a defense, not just this group, they're going to force a lot of fumbles. They're going to deflect a lot of passes, and they're going to cause some havoc on the other offenses, and we're going to get turnovers because that's what we're going to have to do to be successful. And I want to believe that, and I want to see it. And they're capable. These are pro athletes who have a shot to live out their dreams and play in front of Bears fans in this city who care a lot about this team. And I believe in them. And I think they should hear that. And I think Bears fans, we need to give these players the space to succeed and the space to fail at times and learn from their mistakes. And I want that's my plea to Bears fans. Do that, because if you do that, you'll be happier. And I think this team in the long term, the sky is the limit for the success that we can achieve.
So I know Jake, he said not to rush. It looks like we're impeding on Joey's lunch potential plans here right now.
Lunch because of me.
It's all good. It was I don't love West Loop Market anyway, so I just kind of threw that out there as more of a joke. Don't love
great people
options
over there though.
I want to make sure you're fed and you're taking care of your body. So I only have a couple more things anyway.
I'll have an Owen. Don't worry, I'll have an Owen.
Yeah, Owen shakes.
There we go. There it is. Right in the bottle. Perfect. So one fill in the blank, and I'll go to let's go to Jake first on this one. The Bears' best starting offensive lineman in Week 1 will be blank. And in Week 17, it will be blank. It could be the same player, but you can take this wherever you'd like it.
Okay.
You got this.
Week 1, for sure, in my mind, Lucas Patrick.
Okay.
Because we need him to be I think he's putting in the preparation. That relationship with Fields is vital. I hope it's just as good by Week 17 for him. But by the end of the season, Larry Borum is going to make his mark in the NFL, and people are going to know that he is someone that you need to know about and you need to game plan against. And I think that's something I'm looking forward to over the course of the entire 22 season.
I like it.
Same one for me, Will, or you got one for the defensive line?
No.
Okay, fine. I'm saying Cody Whitehair, Week 1. And Week 17 is going to be Teven Jenkins as the guy that solidifies himself in this offensive scheme, shows those physical attributes that were in college. They're there, can play out in the NFL, and he has a role and is part of what the Bears want to do moving forward with, again, we talked about it early on, creating and establishing that physicality, that nastiness. He is the one player that I think every Bears fan looks to and say he has it. Now can it just come to fruition with this scheme and with all the other 4 guys that were there?
Let's hope.
I like it a lot. That's a great one there, Nick. Let's get some bold predictions for each side of the ball here real quick. We'll start with the defensive line. My bold prediction entering this season, I'm going to go with a singular player. I'm eyeing Trevis Gipson, someone that we're all very high on, and I have him ending the season with 12 sacks by himself. So that's going to be my bold prediction up front for the defensive line. Nick, how about you?
Ooh, I was going to have something with Trevis Gipson too, but I'll go to Justin Jones, who I think it's overshadowed and left out a couple, just in discussion with this Bears defensive line. But by the end of the season, not throwing out any stats or anything, people are going to look to Justin Jones and feel like he's our 3 tech moving forward. He's worth the 2-year contract that the Bears gave to him. He wasn't our first option, but, man, I feel good with what the Bears did in acquiring Justin Jones. He's the disruptor that Eberflus needed in this Bears defense.
As long as he didn't say Robert Quinn breaks his own record, I'm a happy guy. Jake's like, backspace, but what do you have, man?
Yeah, this one's tough. I guess I kind of made a bold prediction, a big one with Larry Borum, and I hope that comes to fruition. I'm going to go with this one, though. It's a player we haven't talked about a ton today, but one that could have a role on this team, and it's Mario Edwards Jr.
Okay, yeah.
And the reason I say this is because in, Oakland, now Las Vegas, right, with the Raiders, I believe Chris Morgan was there. If I'm not mistaken, am I off on that? I'm sorry. Jeez.
Atlanta, yeah.
I knew I was going to jack that up. So bear with me here. See, give me room to succeed and give me room to fail, and I'll come back, and I promise I'll make it worth it. The defensive line coach, Travis Smith, was with the Raiders. Mario Edwards Jr. was also there a few years ago, I believe, correct? I think that there's something there where a coach believes in a player and saw something, but maybe the opportunity wasn't there before. And maybe look for Mario Edwards Jr. in the first half of the season to make an impact in a few games that help us get a few wins. And thanks for bearing with me there on the particulars. But the entire coaching staff is pretty much new. The front office is new, and most of this roster is new. So we have to all give ourselves a little bit of room for getting to know the Bears players that we're going to love going forward, surrounded by that are going to be surrounding Justin Fields and Roquan Smith.
I like it. That's a really good one there, Jake. Like you said, yours with Larry Borum being like one of those linemen that teams are going to have to game plan against and be known as the best lineman. I think I'll take that for a bold prediction. It actually very much mirrors mine for offensive line, where I said that Larry Borum would be the Bears' highest graded offensive line according to PFF at the end of the season. That was actually my bold prediction, so we're thinking alike.
I like
it. Same. Nick, how about you? Do you have anything different that we haven't hit on? I know we've made kind of some proclamations along the way here for this unit.
Yeah, so the Bears quarterbacks were sacked the most last season. And whether that was on the line, the quarterback himself, whatever, scheme definitely played a factor. That will not be the case this year. Even though the Bears don't have a starting offensive line at this point, they will not lead the league in giving up sacks. They will make a significant upgrade and jump not to the top half of the league, but just outside. I'll put them in that 17 to 20 range, and that's due to the scheme being better, Justin Fields knowing where to go with the ball, and then the offensive line being in a position in a scheme that caters to their abilities. So that's my bold prediction for the offensive line.
All right. One last thing we needed to do, and then this extended episode, which I'm not complaining about, can come to a close. So the last thing we need to do is our confidence meters. And Jake, if you're wondering what do we want out of you for this segment, our confidence meter is pretty much a scale of 1 to 10 and how confident you are in this positional group heading into the season. We'll start on defense. My confidence meter is a 6.5 for this unit. Robert Quinn, like I said, expecting some regression. Teven Jenkins, Trevis Gipson. Too many names here in this episode. Trevis Gipson is going to have, I think, another step forward. Muhammad's always been solid. And then the interior of the line itself, I think, is more than serviceable, but not great. And that's kind of where I'm going to leave it for right now. And the depth itself, some of the players that we're expecting to be contributors were the depth pieces last year. And that's kind of where I come with this number right now. So 6.25, 6.5, somewhere in between is where I'm at right now. My confidence meter on the defensive line. Nick, how about you?
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I had 6.7 in terms of the confidence in this group. Just a lot of unproven. And we need to see it in terms of full starters in their role in this defense. They have some guys that are capable of getting to the quarterback. Just need to see it happen. And we're not going to expect Robert Quinn to do what he did last season. Right. It's just not reasonable. But Eberflus does get a lot out of guys that are not big names. I mentioned it like 3 times now. That's the 4th. But can he do that with this group? He's already been preaching the hustle, the hits philosophy, the taking away the football. So put it at a 6.7, and I hope that they definitely break that mark.
For me, I'll go 5.5. And usually my confidence meter at the beginning of the year, I think, would be higher, and then it ends up being lower at the end. But this time it'll be different. We'll go 5-5 to start the year, and let's see it rise at the end of the year.
Love it.
All right. And offensive line has to be lower than defense. I'm at like a 4.25. We've talked about them in depth and all of our question marks. And as it stands today, July 19th, I can't give them more than that.
And look, my bold prediction about like the sacks, it's one thing, but my confidence in the unit as of right now is completely different. I'm at a 3.5, 3.6, around that range. Again, we don't even know the starting line. We mentioned I've never been this confused about a starting offensive line for the Bears ever. And that's currently the state of this team and this offensive line. So 3.5 in the confidence right now.
And I'm probably a 4. I'm a soft 4.
I like it, soft 4. Room to fall down a bit if needed, which is understandable.
All right. That was this episode went a little over, but we had a bunch of guys to talk about. Joey, appreciate you taking time out of your lunch break to be here. Jake, it was awesome having you on. Will, you'll be in studio tomorrow, so it'll be good to be out of the bubble and be right here in these chairs right next to me. So that'll be awesome. But just want to thank everybody who was so interactive in the chat, giving us your predictions, and just being a part of the CHGO community. That's what this is all about. So stay tuned for the rest of the Countdown to Camp episodes that will be just showing you throughout the week here at CHGO Bears. And make sure to follow us on all of our social media accounts. Hit that bell notification on YouTube every time we go live. Training camp's just next week. So we'll be having different times for shows. So you want to make sure that you're notified whenever we go live. But we'll be here tomorrow, 1 o'clock p.m., to break it all down for Countdown to Camp. Appreciate it. And until next time, bear down, Chicago.
Bear down.